All right, for this briefing, we're going to break down a critical 5-day operation from the Spanish Civil War. We're talking about the exploitation phase of the Vizcaya campaign. We'll be looking at how nationalist forces managed to capture the key Guernica-Durango line all between April 25th and 30th, 1937.
Now, all the data and the maps that you're about to see are drawn from the fantastic web project Batallas Guerra Civil. This was developed by Colonel F.J. Victor Rodrigo of the Spanish Army, and it gives us a really solid, rigorous foundation for studying the operational art that was on display during this phase of the campaign.
So here's how we'll tackle this. First, we'll look at the situation on the ground, how the Basque front was completely shattered. Then, we'll dig into the Nationalist plan to exploit that breach. After that, we'll follow the day-by-day advance, see how the Basque command scrambled to respond, and finally, we'll zoom out to understand the bigger strategic factors that really sealed the deal here.
Okay, let's set the stage. The initial Nationalist offensive had already done its job. By April 25th, the Basque front was decisively broken. Their command just wasn't able to pull together an effective containment line, which of course set the stage for a very rapid exploitation.
This map right here shows you the immediate aftermath of the envelopment in the Elorrio-Elgueta sector. That blue line marks the new nationalist positions, and you can see it's a clear breach. This created the perfect opportunity for a deep push, leaving the Basque command with really only one option: trade space for time and try to form a new defensive line further to the west.
So, the breakthrough is there. How did the Nationalists plan to capitalize on it? Let's take a look at their command decision and the specific orders that were issued to the advancing brigades.
The operational order from the 25th of April lays out a multi-pronged offensive. As this map shows, the plan involved 3 main axes of advance. The idea was for them to converge and essentially roll up the remaining Basque defenses. And the main objectives? The strategic towns of Guernica and Durango. The plan had a very clear division of labor. The Flechas Negras Brigade got the coastal axis, pushing toward Guernica from the north. The IV Brigade took the center, advancing on 2 separate axes, but also set to converge on Guernica. And then the A Brigade was given the southern axis, with the objective of taking Durango. It was a classic plan, really, designed to keep pressure on across the entire front.
All right, now we're going to review how this plan was actually executed. We'll examine the progress of each formation, step by step, from the 26th to the 30th of April.
The IV Brigade's advance was incredibly fast. On the 26th, they took Ermua and Eibar. By the 28th, they had penetrated deep into enemy territory, taking key high ground like Monte Oiz and reaching the outskirts of Guernica. And by the 29th, they were entering the town itself. The momentum was just clearly on their side.
Now, up along the coast, the Flechas Negros Brigade used a smart combined arms approach. On April 28th, they transported forces by sea from Ondarroa and then executed a landing at Laquichio. This let the brigade's 2 regiments concentrate and advance on Guernica from both the coast and inland, and they reached it on the 29th. Meanwhile, on that southern axis, the I Brigade executed this wide, enveloping movement to outflank the defenses around Durango. On the 28th, coming from Guernica, they reached the Galinda high ground and, crucially, cut the main road from Durango to Bilbao. This maneuver completely isolated the town, which led to its capture that same day.
We actually have a contemporary record from the I Brigade's own operations diary that gives us a pretty vivid snapshot of the situation. It notes, pursuing the enemy with the bayonet as he evacuated Durango and who flees in disarray. That entry really underscores the complete collapse of organized resistance inside the town.
So by April 30th, after just 5 days of operations, a new consolidated front line was established. As you can see on this map, it now ran from Bermeo on the coast, through Guernica, down to Durango, and was anchored on the Amboto Massif. The territorial gains were, to put it mildly, significant.
Now let's shift our perspective. Let's look at the Basque command and analyze how they responded to this rapidly deteriorating situation, focusing on the key decisions they had to make under extreme pressure.
The Basque command definitely tried to react. An order went out on the 27th to form a new defensive line, anchored on Guernica, Amorebieta, and Gorbe. This basically conceded the loss of Durango, but as this map shows, the 27th and 28th were marked by widespread confusion. It was bordering on panic, which made setting up any kind of coherent defense extremely difficult.
But despite the chaos, some key decisions were made. On the 27th, you have the order for the new defensive line. On the 28th, a decree to formally reorganize the army into divisions and brigades. That was an attempt to improve command and control. And then, crucially, on the 29th, in a high-level meeting, the leadership rejected advice to pull back to the iron belt around Bilbao. Instead, they resolved to continue defending every inch of ground.
To really understand this phase of the campaign, we have to broaden our analysis to the strategic level. We need to look at the decisive role of air power and the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of supporting operations on other fronts.
Supporting operations were in fact launched on other fronts, in Madrid, Aragon, and Asturias. The whole idea was to force the Nationalists to divert resources away from Vizcaya. But as this theater-level map shows, these attacks just didn't have the necessary weight or momentum. The Nationalist command was able to contain them using local reserves, and they never had to pull forces from their main effort up in the north.
You know, the assessment by Comisario General Ramon González Peña at the time really gets to the heart of the matter. He reported, and I quote, "Maneuver is difficult while the enemy maintains its absolute dominion of the air. The resolution of the current situation has to be precisely developed in the air." This assessment highlights the core problem. Nationalist air superiority was the decisive factor. It just neutralized defensive capabilities and made any effective countermaneuver virtually impossible.
And when you look at the specific attacks on the Madrid, Aragon, and Asturias fronts, you see a pattern. None of them were substantial enough to achieve any kind of strategic effect. The conclusion from the source material is pretty stark. The Popular Army, which was still in its formative stages, just didn't have the operational capacity to execute maneuvers big enough to change the outcome in Vizcaya.
So, that concludes our operational briefing. For a much more detailed study of this campaign and others, we once again highly recommend you consult the primary source for this analysis at www.batallasguerracivil.es.
This 5-day operation really serves as a stark case study in the decisive role of air superiority, the effectiveness of combined arms, and the futility of uncoordinated supporting attacks. With all that in mind, we'll leave you with a final question for consideration. Given the established dominance of nationalist air power and the demonstrated failure of those supporting offensives, what, if any, viable tactical or strategic alternatives were really left for the Basque Army in the defense of Vizcaya?